back, everybody, to another VRUG meeting. This one for 2023, February. Glad to have everybody back. Sorry about the meeting scenario end of last year. We just ran into a lot of difficulties trying to get everything to work out and make it happen. So the meeting we had planned for last year is going today. So moving forward with that. Let's see. So next thing up is we're going to cover the agenda here. We're going to cover the save the date for the next VRUG. And today's presentations, Jason Miller is going to present using D2P and Helix for your own custom migrations. And then LJ Longwing is going to present the APL Remedy Toolbox, an overview and new feature demo. So he's made some new coding changes and so forth on that. It's pretty cool features he's got in it. So the next date for the VRUG will be May 25th at 5 p.m. Central Time. I need some people to do presentations. Please contact me or Phil Bautista by email. Let us know that you have something you'd be willing to present. We typically want them to be 30 minutes to 45 minutes in length. If you have something that needs to be longer than that, we'll take up 2 slots. It's not a problem. We can handle it. So let me know if you got something to present. Would love to have you on here. And it does not have to be strictly remedy subjects. It could be discovery. It could be some other product that you're interfacing with BMC Remedy or Helix oriented pieces. Anything is open for these VRUGs.
Hey Bob, I'm not sure if you can see my hand raised up there in the
yes,
middle
I can.
of the sky there, but what I was going to ask is on that same line. I know you and I have been talking, and you've been making some inroads with discovery folks, right? So that's a great segue into. I guess I would just ask, maybe just if you want to raise your hand or have some sort of reaction, if you'd be interested in seeing anything with discovery. Bob and I did some work on discovery that has led to him having some deep discussions with the BMC folks. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things coming out of discovery that actually, Bob, I'm going to toot your horn for a sec, Bob, that Bob has had influence in the development of the discovery tool and its integrations in some of the technical knowledge updates of TKUs. So by show of hands, is there anyone interested in here? Raise your hand on Zoom or whatever that would be interested in seeing a presentation about discovery. Anybody? Oh, there's LJ.
Yeah, and some of the recent stuff Phil's talking about there that we got going is as part of the TKUs now, they hold end of life data for different devices. And I'm working to make REST API calls back to discovery to pull that end of life data and put it into our modeled of property and equipment that we have to identify points and times where we need to recognize we're going to need to have funding to replace equipment and so forth. And BMC has hinted that there will be updates to the CMDB structure in the future to get that data moved into CMDB. So just FYI for that. So
Bob, I saw a couple of hands come up. I saw Marek and I saw LJ, and I also know, I see Randy on here, Randy Helms, and I know that when I was working with their team at PG&E, my role there, oddly enough, was discovery only, and I didn't really get a chance to do all of the remedy stuff. So I think it sounds to me like, Bob, it would be good if we could get them. Oh, and Joe D'Souza raised his hand also. I think it sounds like discovery will be a great topic for one of the times. So maybe we can reach out to the folks that we're working with there at BMC. Back to you, Bob. I'll put myself on mute.
okay. So Joe, I see your hand's still up. Are you wanting to say something? I think that is no.
No.
All right.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So again, thank you, everybody. And here's my email contact in case you need it. I'm going to stop sharing now and going to hand it over to Jason Miller. Jason, are you ready?
Yeah, I believe so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. All right, let's find the share button. All right, I'll get out of the way. Cool. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So the D2P or oh geez, I forgot the actual technical name. That's what it was originally called when it was first released. The package management in AR system. It's a cool tool, and I don't know that everybody knows you can use it. I've talked to a number of people, and they didn't realize they could use it for their own deployments, their own purposes. If you've upgraded, if you've built a 2002 ITSM system, then you've used this because you had to run the 1805 installer, and then there were no more of the old school installers. You had to deploy the packages. So BMC uses it for their deployments. And I've worked in an organization before where my team decided this was how we were going to deploy things between environments. And so it works pretty well. So with that, I got a few slides I'll go through, and then I'll do some demos. But the overview is you create a package, you add all the things you want in there, and there are different types of objects you can add. And then you build it, it does some validation and whatnot, and that will give you, the system will build a zip file, and then you export that. And then you can import that zip file to whatever environment you need to bring it into, and then there's a deploy process. So here's the package file itself, the zip file. Now, one thing to note, you cannot view the contents with Windows Explorer, the default Windows zip utility, but you can with other third-party utilities, WinZip, 7-Zip, WinRAR. And here I've got some examples of, here's some data in the file, and then here's a def file. So you can dig in and find the bits, the objects that will be imported. And then here's even one, I'll show this a little bit later, but a PowerShell script that gets deployed and run. Let me move me a little bit. So for the AR objects, you can add any kind of objects, forms, filters, packing lists. You can add, modify, and delete objects. So, you know, if it's something new, a new filter, a new active link you've created, you can add that to an environment, but it will also do updates. And the definitions are fetched from the AR server directly. So there is this option, the static def file, but if you select that, it gives you a message that says this is only for BMC. So they get to use it, but we don't. But I really haven't found a need for that because I usually just go fetch it live from the server. The application object, that is one of the types of objects, and it will tell you that that's not implemented yet, at least in 2002. Now, I should have prefaced everything. This is all on-prem 2002 focused. I don't know in the latest releases if this has changed. So if anybody has any information on that, feel free to correct me, but I haven't quite been able to get my hands on that yet, on the new Kubernetes stuff. So instead of doing an application object for a deployable application, you would select container, and then the type of container is an application. So the one thing to note about that is only the application container and not the contents of the application. So if your deployable application has 5 forms, 30 active links, that's not going to be included in this. You'll still need to add that. And that's where I have found packing lists are pretty useful. I will create the packing list in Dev Studio with all my objects, and then that's just one line. Here you can see a packing list. And instead of going through and adding all the filters individually, you can select multiple, but I just found managing it through a packing list is easier for me. And here's an example of the various lines of things I added to a deployment package. So here's a packing list. I do have some data and I'll show that, and then some definitions. So like I noted, you can also include data, which is really helpful, especially because often times we have configuration data we need to move with our definitions. So you can include that in the package. And it's, it basically ends up running the import utility when you deploy the package. And so a lot of the options are very similar to import, suppress filters, match your duplicates, duplicate request IDs. These are all the same options we have when we use the import tool. But this is great to keep everything in one package, and especially the configuration data. Now, in this example, I'm going to the work order template. In my lab environment, I noticed there is a functionality to get an application object, and I will show that because I know that was one thing Bob was interested in when we were talking about this session a while back. In my lab environment, work order was not showing, and I dug in a little bit, but I haven't fixed it. So in this case, I just went ahead, go to the work order template form, and pull anything where field 8 is like REQ : Another cool thing is this little validation, this records retrieved. It will show you how many records match your qualification. So you get some feedback right here as you build your qualification. If your records look right, or if it's 0, you have a problem. One thing to note is this doesn't automatically update until you click in it. Just click in the field and then it will go and fetch the record count. Another great feature of the package management tool is the ability to do SRM. And if you've worked with SRM, you know how many forms, how complex the SRDs, the AOTs, the PDTs can get. There's multiple layers. And then the questions for the SRD. This lets you grab everything at once and as a package, and I don't have that highlighted in the screenshot, but I'll show it live. It just grabs it and includes it in your definition or in your package. You can also include the fulfillment template. So that's where I was showing here's the data. One thing I've found myself using this for is when I'm getting pretty heavy into a development of an SRD and I have to do some major structure changes, or even just to keep a restore point, is I will come in here, make a package and export the zip file. And now I have a good copy that I know works. And this works along with the older import-export console in SRM, but I've been favoring this more lately. It seems to work really well, and I've never had a problem with it yet. Even doing updates to SRDs, it handles very well. Another neat thing that I just started working on for this demo or for this session is binary payloads. I know BMC does it, but I had never taken the opportunity to do it myself. So I dove into that. And basically, you can deploy any jar files, the plugin jars, configuration files, anything on your servers. And you have the option to select all servers, AR servers, mid-tier servers, or smart IT servers. And you define that in this AR system single point deployment payload, and we'll dive into that in a few minutes. And it will basically run your payload, whether that's a OS command or a script. One thing to note is by default, it will not automatically kick off your deployment. There is a batch file, or in Linux, a shell script that says that you run on each server where you're going to deploy the payload, and you have to run that, and it tells the system, okay, I'm ready for this package. You can change that default, and that's what we're talking about here, this file deployer.local deployment required. If you set that to false, it will just auto deploy. And you change that in the deploy config properties file. Here's an example of what it will do when it's waiting for that script to run, and I'll show that live.
Hey, Jason, I'm going to interrupt you for just 1 second regarding the binary payload.
Yeah.
One thing to keep in mind is that BMC does not like you storing anything on the OS in the containerized versions. So the binary payload is not as useful as it once was, because when you're deploying something via payload, it may or may not exist next time you boot the container.
Yep, that's a good point.
So just FYI from a binary payload perspective.
Yep, I'm still living in the old world where managing my own servers and OSs and doing those kind of things. But even then, I mean, I've an example of I had in the past. I'm going to show a PowerShell example, but in the past I had this PowerShell script that would do a rolling restart of mid tiers, and I had all the logic in mid tiers and the service names in that script. And I guess this does change in Kubernetes because then you're doing your pods and whatnot, but I could have made that a simpler, a more simple script that where it just does the local host, and I could have deployed that from Remedy. Anytime I needed to run it, it would have deployed the script, run it, and it would have been data driven versus being configured all in my script. So I've wanted to do that, but I haven't got to that point yet. And in my lab, I only have a single server. That's my mid-tier AR database, everything. But so this is an example of my simple script I'm going to run, and here's what it looks like in the deployment payload form. And one cool thing is you can copy to new and just keep running it. And that could be pretty powerful because since it's data, you can use workflow with it even, or, you know, like I said, you can just copy to new and kick it off. So let's go ahead and we'll get into the demo. So let's see, here is my lab system and AR system deployment management console. And you can see I have a few in here that I've been working on. Let's just create a simple one. If you've never done this, I'll show you. And they have the package versions. Now, sometimes if I'm doing pre-release stuff, you know, I think most people think about putting one, but I do put, you know, a decimal, a pre-release version just for my own sanity, and that will get added to the zip file that's created. So that can be really helpful if you're keeping an archive or you know, restore points as you develop. That's very helpful. And let's see, let's go ahead and add the packing list. One thing you do, I found this a little bothersome, is you have to add a description for every line you add. Sometimes the name is descriptive enough for me, but you know, you get used to it. So here's my packing list. It's a VRUG packing list. And I'm going to add that. And just for demonstrations, let's add an AR definition. And we'll add the people form. And one thing I tend to do is you have the option to do both base. I always pick overlay just to make sure I'm playing by the rules and I'm only grabbing overlaid objects. I mean, obviously you might have a use case to do otherwise, but for the most part, I like that as a safety net for myself. We'll add the people form. Oops, I already added. And then let's go ahead. I'll just add some data. Let's see. And I have my configuration form. We're going to do the good old 1 = 1. And see how it didn't go fetch the data. If I click around, it doesn't update the count. But if I click in there, now I can see I'm going to get 83 records. We'll suppress filters. We'll reject. We're going to use request ID. Why not? And I don't fully understand this, and I meant to look up, and I ran out of time. On data, I know there's been talk about having overlays for data. As far as I'm aware, that's never really been implemented, at least for the public's knowledge. So I pick overlay mode. I don't really know what that does, but I haven't had a problem. And so here's the package. If you want, you could put your email address in here and it will email you as it deploys and progresses. And so save that package. And now we have a simple package. Now that's the build, or the creation part. So the next piece is to build it. And it goes through its process, pending validation, and validation successful. Okay, ready for export. So now I can export this. I will save it. And if I go to my downloads, here's my package, and here's that version number I was telling you. It adds automatically. So we can take a quick look in there. Some of the metadata adds. It does a checksum, but here we can see my packing list def file. Here's my people def file, and this should be the ARX. Yeah, my configuration data. So that's all in there, and I can pull it out if I need to. So it's really a great way to archive things as well, and take snapshots of your objects or your data. And one thing, okay, I'm going to just go ahead and delete this so I can import it. And then you import it. Look, we can pretend I'm in a different environment. Go to my downloads. And it will do some importing. I believe it does a validation. Ready to deploy. And then you simply deploy it. Now, this doesn't have any binary content, so this will complete by itself. Pending deploy, give it a moment. One thing I do also, and you may have done this if you've built an ITSM system with the larger packages, is I will come in here and watch the status move, and some of the BMC packages are hundreds of lines. So you can watch it progress. I just sit here and keep clicking refresh to watch it go through, and that tells me it's still doing something. But we can see.
So yep. Jason, Mike Gould has a question. He says, when adding in forms, can you only add in one form per entry, or can you do multiple?
You should be able to select multiple. Let's check real quick. I did it with filters earlier. This is also why I tend to like the packing list, so I don't spend as much time in here. But let's double check. It should allow you to multiple select. Yep, so it will add them all.
There you go. And I got a question for you, Jason, when you get back over to the other screen before this one.
Okay.
So when you have built it in that ready to deploy state, where like you got the VRUG sample there, in an older version, you couldn't edit and add more stuff to it if you realized that something wasn't right.
Yeah, and that's still the case, at least in 2002, but you can copy it and then you can edit that.
Stuff to it. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I think part of that is because it does a checksum on the zip file. So if it's going to make you build a new copy of it versus modifying the existing one.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's part of the versioning process. So if it was able to allow you to edit it, would you still be dealing with version 1?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, there's no way to take it out of deployed and go backwards is kind of the point, right?
Right. You have to copy it, which creates a new version, and then you can export the new version to make use on another system. So.
Yep. And let's see. I'm going to try to pick it up because I burnt through a half hour faster than I thought I would.
And Joe is stating over here for us about data overlay mode and base mode. His guess would be that if you select base mode, it would be importing the data into the base form and not the overlay ? And if so, I do not know what the use case would be to import data to the base instead of the regular table. But anyway, that's
Yeah, but from a structure standpoint, that isn't different yet. It still goes to the same table. So, and that's where I don't understand. And I don't know if maybe BMC changed direction, because I remember back in the day at the conferences, there was mention of overlays for data. I don't know if that fully got built, or this is just forward-looking option that never got fleshed out. I'm not entirely sure.
And Marek is saying that base is the same table as the overlay on the
Yeah.
level of data. So
Yeah. So I don't really know how that works, if it works. So real quick, I'm going to try to get going so LJ can do his, but I did want to show the SRM, building SRM. So let's see, what am I looking for? SRM, come in here, SRD, and you have a few different options. You can do the full package of everything. You can do a process definition template or supporting data. Let's go ahead and do the SRD. And I'm going to pick my amazing work order to do something. And if I were to pick that apart and, deploy this, build it, export it, it's going to have all the pieces of my SRD in there. The AOT, the PDT, the questions, everything. That's one-stop shopping to get an export of this. The one piece I usually do is come back, and if I add a new, that's where I'll end up getting the application objects. And I'm just going to, for the interest of time, I'm going to add my change data in here. I'm kind of switching streams, but templates. So let's say you have a change template in your dev environment, and you want to get the template, the change template, the tasks, everything. You can do that by coming in here, selecting application object, change management, and I'm going to pick my really cool change. And if I add that, it will export all the related, the tasks, the task groups, all the pieces I need. And when you import it, it actually uses the UDM load forms. So it's following the best practices of merging information that BMC recommends. So it doesn't just put it right into the template forms directly. It goes through the load process. So let's see, looking at my notes.
and Mike, I'm gonna save your question, Mike, till he gets toward the end.
Okay, and let's go ahead, and I'm going to do the binary package real quick. I'm not going to save that. So here is the single deployment payload, and you can actually access that from the home page under administration, AR system single point deployment payload. But here's where I ended up. I zipped up my PowerShell script in the zip file. I added it. I figured out the PowerShell command to make it run properly, and I created this record here. Now, if I click yes, and just real quick, here's my script. All it's going to do is send to a log file in this location. It's going to say D2P just executed the script boss with a timestamp. That's all it does. But it could do whatever, reboot your server, reboot your friend's server, whatever. So if you set this, you know what, let's go ahead. I'm going to copy to new and save this. If I bring it back up. So here's my new one. If I set this to yes, that's going to tell it to try to run. Now, I don't have this system configured to automatically deploy payload, binary payload. So it's going to be waiting for me to run the script, the batch file. And it should say waiting for utility run to run. Here's a tail of my log file that it's going to write to. So here is the payload bat. And there we go. It wrote to my log file. So that just ran, it pulled my PowerShell script out of the zip file, out of this package, deployed it on the server. And this could be, I only have one server in this case, but this could be just mid-tier servers. This could be just AR servers. It could be all servers. So that's pretty powerful, especially when you start getting, to you know, more than 5 servers, 10 servers, you know, some people have very large environments. And again, this is really only good for on-prem 2002 and earlier. But, you know, I could just keep doing this. And what's really neat is you could do this through workflow. So if you had some complex process where you needed to run a script and trigger that in Remedy, you could do that. And I'll just run the batch file again. And there we go, just executed in my script. It's that simple. So that is actually now available. If I come into here, and one thing I noticed, these don't clean themselves up and they'll show duplicate in the package manager. So I'm just going to clean them up. But just show you real quick that you can also include that script as part of your package. And payload successful. Here's my demo, and right there. So, oops, there's my script. So I could build this package out with all my forms, data, anything I want, and then you can order these and, you know, the sequence you need them to run in. And, you know, so if I had a script that I needed to run at the very end, I could do that. You know, maybe it was a script to flush your mid-tier cache. You could do that. So that is the quick overview. There's some features in here that I really haven't dug into yet that I would like to. This has the ability to roll back changes. I've had, in some early versions, I've had some bad experiences with that. Maybe I wasn't doing it right, or those earlier versions could have been a little bit buggy, and I haven't had a chance to do it in 2002. 2002, so I can't speak to how well that's working these days. It's one of those things I would like to dig into some more. Also pre-checks. I haven't really dug into this, but you can add a pre-check. So you can look for, you know, you could see if there's certain data in your form. So if you're missing a object or some data, it will skip that. So, you know, if your pre-check fails, then it won't move on. And that's something I haven't really dove into yet, but it's there. All right. That is the demo.
Mike
Yeah.
had a question for you up here. He said, if you're doing an upgrade and stood up a fresh install server, would you use this method to move all your customizations, or would you use the older export import defs and data import methods? And Marek added to that the question's good because sometimes there's dependencies, such as you got to have the join form after the regular and the filter guide after the filter, etc. On it. So what are you thinking there?
It's really a personal preference. I've done it both ways. You know, I've worked some places where, like I said, this was our method. Now we never built a brand new server, so I haven't gone to that extent. I personally probably would do it through def files because that's just, I've been doing it that way for decades and I'm more comfortable that way. But there's no reason why this couldn't work that way. And it does, you know, it would have the benefit of allowing you to stage everything. You could add all the pieces, and you're right, you would have to pay attention to the order to make sure your regular forms are created before your join forms. And I don't remember, it's been a while, if you have say you import a filter against a form that doesn't exist yet, I do believe it will error out. So you do have to be very thoughtful on your sequencing. Absolutely.
Yeah, and when I've played with this, Jason, and I don't use it a whole lot. I probably ought to use it more. And when we upgrade to our Helix on-prem, we will definitely be using this more. What has been great about Migrator is that it's just a checkbox in your options to say, hey, move any menus when you move this form up. You have to remember to add your menus to it over here. And that's part of his value of doing the packing list that he was dealing with, is that adding that stuff into the packing list. I've gone through doing this, adding one form at a time, remembering to add the menus and all that kind of stuff. And it's that a package list can get very large very quick doing it that way. And so I need to get in the habit of using packing lists more for doing with this.
Yeah, and yeah, to that point, I've personally have not typically found a very much use for packing lists in history.
Yeah,
I know that could be a very hot subject with some people, but this is actually where I have found the most use for that, because I just find it's a lot easier to put it in the packing list in Dev Studio, and then you only have one object in here. And that way you could, if you could structure your packing lists in order of dependency. So it could, say you had a packing list of all the regular forms, and then you had a packing list of all the joins, or your items that are going to depend on other objects. You could build your packing lists that way, and then you just sequence them like that in the package. Let's see. I wasn't watching questions. Are there any other questions?
No, that's what I've been watching for you.
I know. Thanks.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
So yeah, I just, when we were talking a while back, I brought up the deployment package, the package manager, the AR system deployment management. There we go, instead of D2P. And Bob kind of caught some interest in it, and I know I've talked to other people over time, and they're like, yeah, I've never thought to use that, even though many of us have used it to build an ITSM system. We don't tend to think it's there for our use, and I've found it's pretty helpful. And I do like being able to just take snapshots of things. Sometimes I build a package just to capture state of my objects and my data, and now I have a restore point or a reference point down the road.
Yeah, and part of why I brought it up, Jason, is that there are several areas out there that are doing like we are right now, to trying to make a decision about the upgrade to Helix from having been in an on-prem scenario. And some may be choosing to go with the BMC SaaS solution. And if you do that, and you do a lot of custom work and so forth, this becomes your only way to get things into your production in the BMC SaaS.
Yep, exactly.
Because they will not allow you to have Dev Studio access to the production environment to move things in. And also with the new version with Helix having the progressive web app views, Migrator doesn't know about your progressive web app views. And so it can't handle working in that environment. So you either got to be fully on-prem and using Dev Studio with dev files, or use this to get to the BMC SaaS to get to production. So I figured it was useful around now for everybody to begin to recognize the use of this tool.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I think, and especially where you're forced to use it, I think it is enforcing a good practice. So it might be a little painful for us to get used to, and, change isn't always easy, but I think ultimately it's very nice to be able to bundle your things up into this package and, through the web interface, deploy it. Now, one thing, if you've read through the ITSM documentation, when you're updating your 1805 to 2002 system, you do have to increase the heap size, because some of those zip files, those packages can get pretty large, and apparently it can crash the process. So it's documented in the ITSM install docs, but that's something to consider if you're going to be doing a very large package. You want to make sure your heap is your memory heap is large enough.
Anybody else want to open their mic and ask Jason a question? All right, I think that's good. Jason, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
I appreciate you putting that together